I'm Allison, 28, and last year at our weekly family dinner, my life imploded in an instant. You have no home here anymore, my father announced coldly, my mother nodding in agreement. 3 months unemployed after company downsizing, and my own parents were evicting me from my childhood home. Their ultimatum felt like a knife to my heart. Leave by tomorrow evening. Before I tell you how I rebuilt my life from scratch, let me know where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe to follow my journey of resilience and reinvention. Growing up in Westfield, Connecticut meant privilege wrapped in expectations. Our colonial-style house with its manicured lawn stood as a monument to my parents' success and the success they demanded from me. Richard and Catherine Michel weren't just my parents. They were pillars of achievement in our community. Dad headed a financial consulting firm while Mom was a celebrated neurosurgeon. Their mantra, repeated throughout my childhood: Michels don't settle for mediocrity. From kindergarten through high school, I lived by their strict standards. A- grades weren't celebrated, they were dissected for improvement. Piano recitals weren't enjoyed, they were critiqued. Family vacations weren't for relaxation, they included educational tours and language practice. Every achievement was merely a stepping stone to the next expected success. Their love, I learned early, came with conditions. When I brought home perfect report cards, I received rare smiles and occasional celebratory dinners. When I won the state debate championship, Dad proudly mentioned it at his country club. When I stumbled like when I didn't make first chair in orchestra, the disappointment in their eyes cut deeper than any lecture could. My acceptance to Cornell delighted them, though they wondered aloud why I hadn't aimed for Harvard. Still, they paid my tuition without complaint, introducing me as our daughter, the Cornell student, with a pride I desperately crave. A marketing degree and job offer from a prestigious New York firm before graduation finally earned me what felt like unconditional approval. For 5 years, I thrived professionally. A one-bedroom apartment in Manhattan wasn't spacious, but it was mine. I made director at 27, the youngest in company history. My parents finally introduced me without qualifiers or suggestions for improvement. Christmas bonuses funded lavish gifts for them, a Rolex for Dad, a Mediterranean cruise for Mom's 60th birthday. These tokens seemed to cement my place as the successful daughter they'd raised me to be. Then came the corporate merger. Despite my performance reviews, my position was deemed redundant. 20% of the company was let go, including me. I received a decent severance package, but Manhattan rent quickly devoured it. Each week, I sent out dozens of applications. I networked at industry events, met former colleagues for coffee, updated my LinkedIn profile obsessively. My parents' initial sympathy lasted approximately 2 weeks. Have you tried reaching out to James Harrington? Your father played golf with him last month, Mom suggested during our weekly phone call, barely concealing her impatience. Maybe you should consider relocating to a smaller market, Dad advised, as though I hadn't thought of every possible option. When 3 months passed with only 2 interviews and no offers, my savings dwindled dangerously. I couldn't make next month's rent. Swallowing my pride, I called my parents. I might need to come home for a little while, I said, hating how my voice trembled, just until I land something new. The pause before my mother's response spoke volumes. Well, I suppose that would be the practical solution, she finally replied, her tone suggesting I was asking to borrow a significant sum rather than seeking shelter. Moving back into my childhood bedroom at 28 felt like failure incarnate. Designer clothes hung in the same closet that once housed my high school uniforms. Marketing awards sat next to participation trophies from middle school soccer. Everything about the room reminded me of who I had been and who I was expected to be, not who I actually was now. The first few weeks, my parents maintained a veneer of support. Dad mentioned my situation to his business contacts. Mom suggested I take advantage of this break by taking some professional development courses. But as week 4 bled into week 8, the atmosphere in the house changed perceptibly. Still in pajamas at 10, Mom would remark, finding me at the kitchen table scrolling through job listing. Johnson's son started his own consulting business when he got laid off, Dad would mention casually over dinner. Their comments grew increasingly pointed. Elizabeth's daughter lost her job too, but she's already found something new in pharmaceuticals. Have you considered widening your search parameters? The tension built like a pressure cooker. I started avoiding common areas of the house, taking my coffee to my room, eating dinner after they'd finished. I applied to marketing positions, then communications roles, then administrative jobs, then retail positions. I received rejection emails daily, sometimes within hours of applying. The fateful dinner was supposed to be different. Mom had texted me specifically to be home by 6. "We want to discuss your plans," her message read. I spent the afternoon researching career pivots, drafting a monthly budget to show them how I was managing my dwindling funds, and even printing out confirmation emails for upcoming interviews. I arrived at the dining room with a folder of materials and a rehearsed speech about my strategy. Little did I know they had already made their decision about my future. The dining room felt unusually formal that evening. Mom had set out the good china, the set reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. A bottle of Cabernet breathed on the sideboard. The chandelier light reflected off the polished silverware. The scene struck me as odd for a Wednesday night. "I made roast chicken," Mom announced as I took my seat. My father was already positioned at the head of the table, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he scrolled through something on his tablet. "Smells delicious," I said, placing my folder of job search materials beside my plate. "I've actually prepared some things to show you about my job search progress." Dad glanced up briefly, his expression unreadable. "Let's eat first." Dinner began with unusual silence. Normally, my parents discussed their workdays, community gossip, or articles they'd read. Tonight, they exchanged glances that made my stomach tighten. Mom refilled her wine glass twice before we finished the main course. "So," I ventured during a lull, "I have 3 interviews lined up next week. One's for a marketing position at a smaller firm, but the pay is competitive. The other 2 are—" "Allison," my father interrupted, setting down his fork with precision. "Your mother and I need to discuss something with you." He removed his glasses and folded them carefully, a gesture I recognized from childhood disciplinary talks. My pulse quickened. "It's been almost 3 months since you moved back home," he began, his tone measured. "When we agreed to this arrangement, we understood it would be temporary." "It is temporary," I insisted. "I'm doing everything I can to find a new position. The market is tough right now, but—" "We've been patient," my mother interjected, her voice carrying that clinical detachment she likely used with difficult patients. "But we're concerned that you've become comfortable in this situation." Comfortable? I wanted to laugh. Nothing about sleeping in my childhood princess bed at 28 while receiving daily rejections felt comfortable. "I assure you, I'm not comfortable," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I spend every day applying for jobs. I've had multiple interviews. I've networked, I've revised my resume countless times. Yet here you still are," Dad stated flatly. "Living under our roof, eating our food, contributing nothing to the household." The words stung like a slap. "I offered to pay rent. You said it wasn't necessary." "Because we expected you to find employment promptly," Mom replied. "You've always been resourceful, Allison, until now." Dad leaned forward, tenting his fingers. "We've come to a decision. Your mother and I believe we've been enabling a pattern of dependency that isn't healthy for any of us." My chest tightened. "What are you saying?" "We're saying it's time for some tough love," he continued. "Sometimes children need a push to truly spread their wings." "I'm not a child," I said, heat rising to my face. "I'm dealing with economic realities that are beyond my control. The job market is difficult right now. Companies have hiring freezes. I can show you the statistics." "Statistics don't pay bills," Mom cut in. "When I was your age, I was completing my residency while pregnant with you. No excuses, no delays." "Different time, different economy," I countered. "Medical careers weren't facing the same challenges then as marketing jobs are now." Dad's expression hardened. "Your generation always has excuses: the economy, mental health, work-life balance, terms we never had the luxury to consider." "They're not excuses, they're valid concerns that affect millions of professionals," I insisted, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain calm. "Regardless," Mom said, taking another sip of wine, "we've made our decision. We think you need significant motivation to move forward with your life." Dad nodded. "We want you out of the house by tomorrow evening." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at them, certain I'd misheard. "You're kicking me out," my voice sounded distant as though someone else was speaking. "We're encouraging you to stand on your own feet," Mom corrected, her surgeon's hands perfectly steady as she cut another piece of chicken. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, incredulous. "You know I don't have enough savings left for a security deposit." You know I'm still job hunting. You have friends, Dad said dismissively. Or you can figure something out. You're resourceful when you need to be. I can't believe this. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You're my parents. I came to you for help during a difficult time, and you're throwing me out. We're doing what's best for you in the long run, Mom insisted, though she wouldn't meet my eye. What if I were sick? I demanded. Would you throw me out then? What if I'd lost my job due to injury instead of corporate restructuring? Dad's jaw tightened. Don't be dramatic. You're perfectly healthy and capable. I'm struggling, I admitted, my voice cracking. Not just financially, but emotionally. This job loss has been devastating. I've been dealing with anxiety, insomnia. All the more reason to push yourself forward rather than wallowing, Mom interrupted. Michels don't indulge in self-pity. The familiar refrain made something snap inside me. Is that all that matters to you? The Michel family image, not your actual daughter's well-being. We've supported you for 28 years, Dad replied coldly. College tuition, study abroad programs, your first apartment's security deposit. We've more than fulfilled our parental obligation. Parenting isn't an obligation with an expiration date, I said, pushing back from the table. It's supposed to be unconditional. Nothing in life is unconditional, Allison, Mom stated. That's a lesson you apparently still need to learn. I looked from one to the other, searching for any crack in their unified front, any hint of the loving parents I'd spent my life trying to please. I found none. So that's it, you have no home here anymore, I echoed Dad's earlier words. After everything I've accomplished, after all the times I've made you proud, one setback and I'm out. You have until tomorrow evening, Dad repeated, returning to his meal as though we'd just discussed the weather forecast. I suggest you start packing tonight. Mom stood and began clearing plates, though none of us had finished eating. There are some empty boxes in the garage from our last Costco trip. You can use those. They continued their dinner as I sat frozen in disbelief. After a moment, they began discussing their upcoming anniversary trip to Bermuda, a conversation that pointedly excluded me and my crisis. I finally stood, legs shaking, and left the dining room without being excused, a cardinal sin in the Michel household. Neither parent called after me or acknowledged my departure. Upstairs in my childhood bedroom, I sank onto the edge of my bed, the folder of job search materials still clutched in my hand, now meaningless. Through the window, I could see the perfect lawn, the carefully tended rose bushes, the expensive cars in the driveway, all symbols of the Michel success story that apparently no longer included me. For the first time since losing my job, I allowed myself to cry without restraint. The numbness wore off around midnight, replaced by practical panic. I pulled my suitcases from the closet, the expensive luggage set my parents had given me when I moved to Manhattan, and began the surreal process of deciding which pieces of my life to take and which to leave behind. Professional clothes first. Then essential documents, laptop and electronics. Personal mementos that couldn't be replaced. With each item I packed, the reality of my situation became more concrete. My childhood bookshelf still held my collection of Nancy Drew mysteries and dog-ear Harry Potter books. The bulletin board displayed faded ribbons from swim meets and my Cornell acceptance letter. My nightstand drawer contained birthday cards my parents had given me throughout the years, cards with messages like, "We're so proud of you," and "You continue to exceed our expectations." Those cards felt like artifacts from a relationship that no longer existed. I left them in the drawer. At 2 a.m., I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by half-filled suitcases and texted Madison, my best friend since college who lived about 40 minutes away in New Haven. Something happened with my parents. I need a place to stay just temporarily. I'm sorry to ask. The three dots appeared immediately. Madison had always been a night owl. Whatever you need, couch is yours. What happened? I couldn't bring myself to type out the full humiliation. Tell you when I see you. Can I come tomorrow? Come now if you need to. Her immediate offer of sanctuary brought fresh tears. Tomorrow's fine, thank you, seriously. Don't thank me, that's what friends are for. Red. With somewhere to go, I continued packing with more purpose. By dawn, I had condensed my life into 2 suitcases, a duffel bag, 3 boxes, and my laptop case. Everything else, furniture, books, winter clothes, mementos, would have to stay behind. I dozed fitfully for a few hours before the sound of my parents preparing for work woke me. Through my closed door, I heard their normal morning routine, coffee brewing, NPR playing softly in the kitchen, car keys jingling. The ordinary sounds made the extraordinary situation even more surreal. When I heard my father's car pull out of the driveway, I ventured downstairs. My mother stood at the kitchen island, scrolling through emails on her tablet while sipping coffee. "I've packed what I can fit in my car," I said from the doorway. "I'll be out by this evening as requested." She looked up, her expression professionally neutral. "There's coffee if you want some." The mundane offer in the context of my eviction was so absurd I almost laughed. "No thanks, I just wanted to let you know I found somewhere to go." She nodded. "That's good. Where will you be staying?" "Does it matter?" A flicker of something hurt, annoyance crossed her face. "Of course it matters, you're still our daughter." The contradiction was too much. Am I? Because daughters usually have homes with their parents when they need them. Mom set down her coffee cup with deliberate calm. "Allison, this decision wasn't made lightly. Your father and I discussed it at length. We believe this is what you need right now." "What I need," I said carefully, "is support during a difficult time. Not punishment for circumstances beyond my control." "We're not punishing you. We're motivating you." "By making me homeless?" She flinched at the word. "You're not homeless, you just said you found somewhere to go." "Temporarily, on a friend's couch, because my parents decided their adult daughter doesn't deserve her childhood bedroom during a career crisis." Mom checked her watch, a gesture that said more about her priorities than any words could. "I have a department meeting at 8. We can discuss this when I get home this evening." "I won't be here this evening," I reminded her, "as per your and Dad's instruction." For a moment, she looked genuinely confused, as though she'd forgotten our dinner conversation entirely. Then her expression settled back into professional detachment. "Right. Well, leave your key on the entry table when you go." She gathered her things, then paused. "I do hope you'll keep us updated on your situation." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "So you can critique my progress, offer comparisons to more successful young adults. Remind me how you never needed help at my age." Her lips thinned. "That's unfair, Allison." "No," I said quietly. "What's unfair is discovering that parental love has conditions I wasn't aware of." She had no response to that. After an awkward moment, she simply said, "I have to go," and headed for the garage without a backward glance. I spent the rest of the morning moving my belongings to my car, each trip down the stairs heavier than the last. By noon, my room looked eerily similar to how it had looked before I moved back, as though I'd never returned at all. I took one last look around the house: the formal living room we rarely used, the kitchen where family dinners had become battlegrounds, the study where my father had helped me with calculus homework while simultaneously taking work calls. This house had never really felt like home, I realized. It had been a showcase for the Michaud family success story, not a sanctuary. I placed my key on the entry table as instructed and walked out the front door without locking it behind me. The symbolic gesture felt hollow, but it was all I had. The drive to Madison's apartment in New Haven took longer than usual as I battled rush hour traffic and my own turbulent emotions. When I finally arrived, she was waiting in the parking lot of her apartment complex. One look at my face, and she wrapped me in a hug without question. "Let's get your stuff inside," she said practically. "Then wine, lots of wine." Her efficiency was a bomb. We unloaded my car in silence, stacking boxes in the corner of her modest living room. Her one-bedroom apartment was small but cozy, decorated with flea market finds and photos of friends, nothing like the curated perfection of my parents' home. Once we'd brought everything up, Madison poured 2 generous glasses of red wine and sat cross-legged on her sofa. "Okay, tell me everything." The story poured out of me between sips of wine and unexpected bursts of tears. Madison listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to outrage. "That's beyond cold," she said when I finished. "That's emotional abandonment." "They don't see it that way," I said, staring into my wine glass. "They think they're teaching me some valuable life lesson." "What lesson?" "That parents can discard you when you're inconvenient." I winced at her bluntness, though she wasn't wrong. They believe in tough love, always have. Madison snorted. "There's tough love and then there's no love. This feels like the latter." Her words hit with surprising force. Had my parents ever truly loved me unconditionally? Or had their affection always been tied to my achievements, my ability to reflect well on them? "You can stay here as long as you need," Madison continued, refilling our glasses. "I mean, it's just a couch, but it's yours." 2 weeks, I said firmly. That's my limit for imposing on you, by then I'll figure something else out. Madison started to protest, but I stopped her. I'm serious, 2 weeks. I'm grateful, but I need to set that boundary for myself. She relented with a nod. Okay, 2 weeks, but you're not imposing. That night, lying on Madison's couch under borrowed blankets, the full weight of my situation crashed down. I was 28 years old with no job, no permanent home, dwindling savings, and parents who had effectively disowned me for the crime of experiencing professional setback. For the first time in my life, I had no safety net. No backup plan. No clear path forward. I cried silently into Madison's throw pillow, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Madison's apartment became command central for my job search. Each morning, I woke before she did, folded my bedding into a neat pile, and transformed the living room back into a living room rather than my bedroom. By the time she emerged for work, I was already dressed and hunched over my laptop at her small dining table, sending out applications. You know, you don't have to hide all evidence of your existence, she told me on day 3, gesturing to my meticulously stored belongings. This isn't the Misha house. You can exist in space here. But old habits died hard. I'd been trained to be invisible unless I was achieving something noteworthy. The first week on Madison's couch, I sent out 37 job applications, made 22 follow-up calls, and attended 3 networking events. I received 4 rejection emails, 2 "will keep your resume on file" responses, and overwhelming silence from the rest. My bank account balance became a source of constant anxiety. After calculating my bare minimum expenses, I realized I had approximately 6 weeks before complete financial collapse. Madison refused to accept money for utilities or groceries, which both relieved and humiliated me. Consider it my investment in your comeback story, she insisted when I tried to give her cash for groceries. Besides, I'm not the one whose parents have millions in the bank and still kicked out their daughter. Her righteous anger on my behalf was comforting, but it didn't solve my housing problem. The 2-week deadline I'd set for myself loomed larger each day. On day 10, I expanded my job search parameters significantly. Marketing director positions became marketing associate roles. Marketing associate roles became administrative assistant positions. I applied to retail jobs, restaurant jobs, anything that might generate income while I continued searching for something in my field. Bellevue Restaurant, an upscale place near Yale's campus, called me for an interview the same day I applied. The manager, a harried woman named Janet, glanced at my resume with raised eyebrow. "You're incredibly overqualified," she stated flatly. "Why do you want to wait tables?" I considered lying but opted for a version of the truth. I'm between professional positions and need income while I continue my job search. She studied me for a moment. "You've never waited tables before." "I'm a quick learner with excellent people skills and attention to detail," I replied, deploying the same confident tone I'd used in corporate interviews. "I'll work any shift, including double." Janet hired me on the spot. "Training starts tomorrow. Bring black pants and comfortable shoes. We provide the shirts." I called Madison immediately with the news, presenting it as a victory rather than the significant step down it represented. "That's awesome," she cheered, her genuine enthusiasm for this minor win touching me deeply. "We should celebrate. Take out tonight." The night before my training shift, Madison helped me practice carrying plates up and down her hallway. "The key is to act like you've done this forever," she advised, loading another bowl onto my increasingly precarious stack. "Fake it till you make it." The phrase one I'd used throughout my corporate career took on new, humbling meaning as I practiced balancing water glasses on a tray. My 2-week deadline arrived. True to my word, I had found alternative housing, a weekly rate extended stay motel on the outskirts of New Haven. The place wasn't in the best neighborhood, but it was clean enough and within my drastically reduced budget. "This is ridiculous," Madison protested as she helped me load my suitcases back into my car. "My couch is still available." "I appreciate that more than you know," I told her sincerely. "But I need to do this on my own terms." The motel room was depressingly generic: beige walls, polyester bedspread, laminate furniture. But it was mine, at least for now. I arranged my meager belongings, set up my laptop on the small desk, and tried to ignore the lingering smell of industrial cleaner. My first full week as a waitress nearly broke me physically. Years of sitting at a desk had not prepared me for 8 shifts on my feet. My back ached, my calves cramped, and my hands developed calluses from carrying hot plates. I came back to my motel room each night exhausted, fell into bed still wearing my work clothes, and woke up stiff the next morning to do it all again. The work itself was humbling in unexpected ways. Customers who would have treated me with respect in my previous role now snapped their fingers for attention, complained about minute details, and sometimes tipped insultingly small amounts. I smiled through it all, remembering that each tip brought me one step further from financial ruin. Between shifts, I continued my professional job search with diminishing energy. The dual strain of waitressing and job hunting left little time for anything else. My social circle, already small, dwindled to essentially just Madison, who faithfully checked in on me daily. My parents hadn't contacted me since I'd left. No calls, no texts, not even an email to verify I wasn't actually homeless. Their silence confirmed what the dinner conversation had revealed: I only mattered to them when I was successful. 3 weeks into my new reality, I received a text from a former colleague. "Hey Allison, bumped into your mom at Charity Gala last night. She mentioned you were taking some time to find yourself after leaving your position. Everything okay?" The casual way my parents had rewritten my circumstances to save face made me laugh bitterly in my motel room. Finding myself sounded far more glamorous than working double shifts at a restaurant while living in an extended stay motel because my parents kicked me out. I tapped back, just exploring new opportunities. "Thanks for checking in." The encounter made me realize I needed to sell some possessions to extend my runway. My designer work wardrobe, now unnecessary for my restaurant job, seemed the obvious place to start. I photographed my theory suits, Louboutin heels, and the Prada handbag that had been a gift from my parents when I was promoted to director. Each sale felt like shedding another piece of my former identity, but the influx of cash provided critical breathing room. I calculated that with my waitressing income and reduced expenses, I could now survive approximately 3 months before complete destitution. In my 5th week at Bellevue Restaurant, I was finally hitting my stride as a server. My section ran efficiently, my tips improved as I memorized regular customers' preferences, and Janet occasionally assigned me the lucrative weekend dinner shift. On a busy Saturday night, I was clearing a foretop when a familiar voice froze me in place. "Allison, Michelle?" I turned slowly, arms full of dirty plates, to face Cynthia Porter, my mother's friend from the hospital board. She sat with her husband and another couple, all staring at me with undisguised shock. "Hello, Mrs. Porter," I managed, professional smile firmly in place despite my mortification. We had no idea you were working here," she stammered, looking uncomfortable. "Your mother mentioned you were taking some time off to reassess your career path." "This is part of that reassessment," I replied smoothly. "Can I get you folks started with some drinks?" The encounter was excruciating, but I maintained my composure throughout their meal. They overtipped dramatically, clearly out of pity, and avoided eye contact when they left. I knew the story would reach my parents within. Part of me hoped this might prompt them to reach out, to express concern, to offer help. But no call came. Their silence spoke volumes about what truly mattered to them: appearances, not my actual well-being. By the 2-month mark, I had established a grueling but sustainable routine. Breakfast shifts at Bellevue 3 days a week, dinner shifts the other 4 days, job applications and networking during offs, sleep whenever possible. The extended stay motel had become familiar, if not quite home. I'd added a plant and a cheap poster to make the space feel less transient. My professional job search continued to yield disappointing results. I'd had 6 interviews that went nowhere. The economy wasn't improving. My gap in employment was growing longer, making me less attractive to potential employers. The reality that I might be a waitress much longer than anticipated began to sink in. One night, after a particularly difficult shift featuring a table that ran me ragged and then tipped less than 10%, I returned to my motel room and finally allowed myself to acknowledge a painful truth. My parents had been right about one thing. I had become too comfortable depending on their safety net. I had never truly stood on my own until now. The realization didn't justify their cruelty, but it did clarify something important. If I was going to rebuild my life, it would be entirely on my own terms, not to meet my parents' expectations, not to reclaim my former status, but to create something sustainable and genuinely mine. That night, I outlined a new plan. I would continue waitressing but focus on building marketable skills during my offs rather than applying to positions I wasn't getting anyway. I enrolled in free online digital marketing courses to update my knowledge. I created a portfolio website showcasing my previous work. I started a blog analyzing marketing strategies of local businesses. For the first time since that fateful dinner, I felt a flicker of something like hope, not because my circumstances had improved, but because I was taking control of my narrative. Table 7 became my turning point. They were regulars at Bellevue, a group of 4 marketing professionals from a local agency who came in every Thursday night for happy, that inevitably extended into dinner. I'd been serving them for weeks, memorizing their usual orders and making sure the kitchen prioritized their food. One Thursday in my 3rd month at the restaurant, I overheard them discussing a client's social media strategy that was underperforming. "The engagement metrics are terrible," said the man I knew as Carlos, the apparent leader of the group. "We need to completely overhaul their approach before they pull the account." Before I could stop myself, I jumped in while refilling their water glasses. "Sorry to interrupt, but have you considered using micro-influencers instead of trying to land one big name? I saw a case study where conversion rates tripled with that approach for a similar product category." The table fell silent. I immediately regretted my unprofessional intrusion. "I'm so sorry," I backpedaled. "I couldn't help overhearing, and marketing was my previous field. Please ignore me." Rather than being annoyed, Carlos looked intrigued. "No, that's actually interesting. Tell me more about this case study." For the next few minutes, I outlined the strategy while balancing a pitcher of water. The group asked surprisingly specific questions, which I answered drawing on my previous experience. By the end of the impromptu discussion, Carlos was taking notes on his phone. "So," he said when I finished, "you obviously know your stuff. Why are you waiting tables instead of working in marketing?" I gave him the condensed version: corporate downsizing, difficult job market, bills to pay. I didn't mention my parents or my current housing situation. Carlos handed me his business card. "We're actually looking for someone at Merit in marketing. Send me your resume tonight. I want to bring you in for a formal interview." I nearly dropped the water pitcher. "Seriously?" "Absolutely. You just solved a problem that's been giving us headaches for weeks. That's worth at least a conversation." That night, I stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting my resume and cover letter before sending them to Carlos. He responded by 9 a.m. the next morning with an interview time for the following Monday. The weekend dragged interminably. I picked up extra shifts to distract myself and used my tips to buy a new blouse for the interview, not designer like my previous work wardrobe, but professional enough. Merit in marketing occupied a converted warehouse space near Yale's campus. The office was modern but modest, nothing like the gleaming corporate headquarters where I'd previously worked. Carlos met me in the reception area and gave me a quick tour before the formal interview. "We're small but growing," he explained as we walked through the open workspace. 20 employees total. "We focus on digital marketing for local and regional businesses, though we're starting to land some national accounts." The interview itself was refreshingly straightforward. Carlos and his partners asked practical questions about my experience and ideas, rather than the abstract behavioral scenarios my corporate interviews had featured. I spoke candidly about my previous role, the projects I'd led, and the results I'd achieved. "I'm going to be direct," Carlos said near the end of our conversation. "You're overqualified for the position we have open, which is a junior account manager. But we're impressed with your experience and ideas. We can offer you the role with the understanding that there's room for advancement as we grow." "What would the salary range be?" I asked, heart pounding. He named a figure that was less than half of what I'd made as a director. 3 months ago, I would have been insulted. Today, it sounded like salvation. "When can I start?" I asked. Carlos laughed. "How about next Monday? That gives you time to give notice at the restaurant." I floated out of the interview on a cloud of relief and validation. The position wasn't prestigious. The salary wouldn't support my previous lifestyle. But it was a way back into my field, a foundation upon which to rebuild. Janet was understanding when I gave my notice at Bellevue. "I always knew you were too qualified to be slinging plates forever," she said, giving me a rare smile. "But you were a damn good server. Come back and visit sometime." Her words touched me more than any corporate recognition ever had. I'd earned her respect through consistent hard work, not credentials or connection. With a steady income on the horizon, I could finally address my housing situation. The extended stay motel had served its purpose, but I couldn't live there indefinitely. I spent evenings after shifts searching online for affordable apartments in New Haven. I found a tiny studio within walking distance of Meriden Marketing. The building was older, the appliances outdated, and the closet barely large enough for my reduced wardrobe, but the rent was manageable on my new salary, and the landlord was willing to work with my limited credit history and lack of recent pay stubs. Carlos wrote a letter vouching for your employment, Madison said as she helped me move my few belongings into the studio. That's a good boss. He didn't have to do that, I agreed, arranging my books on the single shelf above my bed. None of this would have happened if he hadn't given me a chance. The studio was approximately 1/5 the size of my Manhattan apartment and furnished with secondhand basics, but the moment Madison left, and I locked the door behind her, I experienced a surge of accomplishment unlike anything I'd felt in my corporate career. This space was mine, earned through my own perseverance without parental safety nets or advantages. For the first time in my life, I was truly independent. My first day at Meriden Marketing set the tone for my new professional reality. The pace was faster than my corporate role, the resources more limited, and the expectations less structured. I was simultaneously overqualified for my position and underqualified for the scrappy, wear multiple hats approach of a growing agency. But I threw myself into the work with renewed energy. I stayed late studying the agency's clients and processes. I volunteered for additional projects. I contributed ideas in meetings without worrying about office politics or stepping on toes. Carlos noticed, "You don't work like someone who's been at an agency before," he observed after I'd been there 2 weeks. "Is that a problem?" I asked. "Just the opposite. Most people from corporate backgrounds expect more hand-holding and clearer processes. You're adapting quickly. Waiting tables teaches you to adapt," I replied with a smile. "Nothing prepares you for multitasking like balancing 8 different tables' needs simultaneously." He laughed. "Well, whatever the reason, we're glad to have you." As weeks turned into months, I settled into my new life. My studio apartment slowly became a home with small, affordable touches: plants in the windowsill, a colorful throw on the second-hand couch, prints taped to the walls. I built genuine friendships with my Meriden colleagues, joining them for happy as I could now afford again and weekend hikes in nearby state parks. The work itself was more fulfilling than I'd expected. Our clients were primarily local businesses and nonprofits organizations where our marketing efforts made tangible differences in their success. I could walk down the street and see restaurants that had increased their business because of campaigns I'd helped create. It was marketing with visible impact rather than abstract corporate metrics. 3 months into my new job, Carlos called me into a conference room. "We've been impressed with your performance," he said without preamble. "The Westville Business District campaign exceeded projections by 32%, and the clients specifically mentioned your contributions during our last review." "That's great to hear," I replied. "It was a team effort." "Yes, but your leadership made a difference. We'd like to promote you to senior account manager. It comes with a raise and more client contact." The promotion validated my decision to start over in a smaller agency. My parents would have considered the title and salary a significant step down from my previous position, but I recognized it for what it was: growth on my own terms. My parents remained silent throughout these developments. Occasionally, I saw their names in local news coverage of charity events or business achievements. I heard from Madison that my mother had run into a mutual friend and mentioned that I was exploring alternative career paths, as though my situation were an intentional sabbatical rather than an expulsion from the family. The revisionist history no longer hurt as acutely. I was building something real without their help or approval, and that knowledge provided a different kind of security than I'd ever known. 1 year after the dinner that changed everything, I walked into Meriden Marketing as the newly appointed Director of Client Services. The promotion had come after I brought in 2 significant new accounts and reorganized our client management system to improve efficiency. My salary, while still below my previous corporate compensation, now supported a comfortable life in my small but beloved studio apartment. The agency had grown from 20 employees to 35, with Carlos increasingly focused on business development while I managed client relationships and campaign execution. We had moved to larger offices in the same converted warehouse, with actual conference rooms instead of repurposed storage spaces. "We need to celebrate your promotion properly," Madison insisted over our weekly Sunday brunch. "Dinner at Olia, I treat." I can pay for my own dinner now, I reminded her with a smile. Director's salary, remember? I know, but I want to. You deserve it after everything. Madison had been my constant through the entire journey. She'd seen me at my lowest, offered support without judgment, and celebrated each small victory along the way. Our friendship had deepened through the hardship in a way I doubted would have happened if my life had continued on its previous track. Fine, I conceded, but I'm buying the wine. My social circle had expanded beyond just Madison. I'd developed genuine friendships with several married-in colleagues, particularly Zoe from the creative team and Ryan from accounts. We regularly gathered for weekend hiking trips, movie nights, and cooking experiments in each other's small apartment. These friendships differed fundamentally from my Manhattan social connections, which had centered around networking events and status signaling. I knew friends knew my full story: the parental rejection, the waitressing gig, the motel, and valued me regardless of my professional standing or family connection. I'd also started volunteering at a local career mentoring program for first-generation college students, sharing practical advice about job hunting and workplace navigation. The experience of helping others through professional challenges proved unexpectedly healing for my own career trauma. My professional reputation in New Haven's business community grew steadily. I spoke at Yale's School of Management about digital marketing trends, wrote guest articles for industry publications, and joined the board of the local marketing association. These achievements, while modest compared to my former corporate profile, felt more authentic and impactful. One ordinary Tuesday, I was reviewing campaign metrics with a client when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't immediately recognize. Allison, this is your father. Your mother and I would like to meet with you to discuss recent developments. Please let us know when you might be available. The message landed like a stone in still water, rippling through my carefully constructed new life. I excused myself from the client meeting and stepped into the hallway, staring at my phone in disbelief. After a year of complete silence, they wanted to discuss recent developments. The phrasing was typically formal and emotionally detached. I wondered what developments had prompted this sudden outreach after so many months of indifference to my well-being. The answer came later that evening when I searched for news about Michel Consulting, my father's firm. The Business Journal reported that Dad had just secured a major contract with Yale New Haven Hospital, my mother's workplace. The article mentioned Richard Michel's family connections to the medical community as a contributing factor to landing the account. They hadn't reached out because they missed me or regretted their actions. They'd reached out because my existence had suddenly become professionally useful again. I didn't respond to the text immediately. Instead, I called Madison. They seriously think they can ghost you for a year and then summon you when it's convenient, she fumed after I explained the situation. That's beyond entitled. It's very on brand for them, I replied, surprised by my own calm. The question is, do I ignore them completely or set them straight? What do you want to do? Madison asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. A year ago, I would have jumped at any chance for parental reconciliation, desperate for their approval and support. But the person I'd become in that year wanted something different: not approval, but accountability. I think I need to see them, I said slowly. Not for reconciliation, but for closure. I need to say things I wasn't strong enough to say a year ago. Madison nodded. Then do it on your terms. Not their house, not their turf. I texted my father back. I can meet Sunday at 1 p.m. at Harvest Wine Bar downtown. This will be a short conversation. His reply came immediately. We would prefer somewhere more private. Perhaps you could come to the house. Harvest or nowhere, I responded, surprised by my own firmness. Your choice. After a longer pause, Harvest at 1 p.m. Sunday is fine. We look forward to seeing you. I spent the intervening days preparing mentally for the encounter. I drafted talking points, then discarded them as too scripted. I considered various scenarios, them offering financial support, them criticizing my current position, them acting as though the past year had never happened. By Sunday morning, I had settled on a simple approach: honesty without anger, boundaries without vindictiveness. I arrived at Harvest Wine Bar 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the back with good sightlines to the entrance. I ordered a glass of wine to steady my nerves, washing the door with growing tension. My parents arrived exactly on time, looking exactly as they always had. Mom in a tasteful St. John suit, Dad in business casual that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They spotted me immediately, their expressions a complex mix of assessment and recognition. "Allison," my father said as they reached my table, "you look well." I didn't stand to hug them or offer cheek kisses as would have been our normal greeting. "Please, sit down." They settled across from me, ordering drinks with practiced ease. For a moment, the silence stretched uncomfortably. "We've been hearing good things about your work at Meriden Marketing," my mother finally said. "The hospital board chair mentioned their campaign for the new cardiac wing. Apparently, you were the lead on that project." So that was it. They'd discovered I was professionally connected to people in their circles again. My stock had risen in their estimation. "Yes, that was my project," I confirmed without elaboration. "It's excellent work," Dad offered. "Very impressive results on a limited budget." In another lifetime, I would have glowed at this rare paternal praise. Today, it barely registered. "Thank you. Why did you want to meet?" My directness visibly startled them. We had always engaged in social niceties before addressing any actual purpose. They exchanged glances before Dad spoke. "We thought it was time to reconnect. It's been quite a while, and we've been concerned about you." "A year," I said evenly. "It's been exactly 1 year since you told me I had no home with you and gave me 24 hours to leave." Mom flinched slightly. "We may have been overly harsh in our approach." "Overly harsh," I repeated. "That's an interesting way to describe throwing your unemployed daughter out during an economic downturn." "We believed you needed motivation," Dad insisted. "And look at what you've accomplished on your own. You've established yourself at a growing agency, earned promotions, built a new network. Our approach, while admittedly severe, seems to have yielded positive results." The audacity of his statement taking credit for my success rather than acknowledging the unnecessary hardship they'd caused ignited something in me. "Let me be clear about what actually happened," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "After you kicked me out, I lived on a friend's couch. When that arrangement ended, I moved to an extended stay motel in a neighborhood where I didn't feel safe walking alone at night. I waited tables for 3 months, sometimes working double shifts just to afford that motel room. I sold my possessions to extend my financial runway. I applied to over 200 jobs before landing at Meridian, where I started at less than half my previous salary." Their expressions shifted from self-satisfaction to discomfort as I continued. "What I've accomplished despite your actions, not because of them. I rebuilt my life without your help, your connections, or your safety net. And in doing so, I discovered something important. I don't need your approval to be successful or happy." "Allison," my mother began, "we always wanted what was best for you." "No," I interrupted firmly. "You wanted what was best for your image of me. There's a difference." Dad's expression hardened. "I think you're being unfair. We provided you with every advantage: education, connections, financial support throughout your formative years. And you weaponized those advantages the moment I faced adversity," I replied. "That's not parenting. That's investment with expected return." "We should have handled the situation differently," Mom conceded, though her tone suggested limited remorse. "But we're here now, wanting to rebuild our relationship. Surely that counts for something." I studied them, these two people who had shaped so much of my identity and values. I recognized now how conditional their love had always been, how performance-based their approval. "Why now?" I asked directly. "Why reach out after a year of silence?" They exchanged another glance, confirming my suspicion. "We've heard about your professional success," Dad admitted, "and there are some potential synergies between your agency's expertise and my firm's new healthcare contract." There it was, not concern for my well-being, not regret for their actions, but potential professional synergy. "I see," I said quietly. "So this isn't about reconciliation, it's about business opportunities." "It can be about both," Mom suggested smoothly. "Family and business have always been intertwined for us. You know that." I took a deliberate sip of wine, considering my response carefully. "I'm willing to maintain a limited relationship with you both," I finally said. "Holiday dinners, occasional family events. But there will be boundaries. My career and financial situations are not topics for discussion or criticism. My living arrangements and personal choices are similarly off-limits. And I will never again depend on you for support of any kind." Dad frowned. "That seems unnecessarily restrictive." "Those are my terms," I stated firmly. "As for business synergies, Meriden evaluates potential clients based on merit and fit, not personal connections. If your firm wants to explore our services, you can contact our new business department like any other prospective client." The shock on their faces was almost comical. They had clearly expected me to jump at the chance for reconciliation on any terms they offered. "You've changed," Mom observed, studying me with new awareness. "Yes," I agreed. "That's what happens when you're forced to rebuild your life from scratch." We finished the meal with stilted conversation about neutral topics. When the check came, I insisted on paying my portion despite their protests, a small but significant assertion of my independence. As we prepared to leave, Dad attempted one last angle. "Your old room is still available if you ever want to move back to Westfield. The commute wouldn't be ideal, but you'd save considerably on rent." The offer might have tempted me a year ago. Now that felt like a trap. "Thank you, but I'm happy in my apartment," I replied. "It's small, but it's mine. I've learned I value independence more than square footage." We parted with awkward hugs and promises to be in touch about Thanksgiving plans. As I watched them walk to their luxury sedan, I felt an unexpected lightness. The encounter had confirmed something important. I had outgrown my need for their approval. My phone buzzed with a text from Madison. "Survival check. How did it go?" I smiled as I typed my response. "Better than expected. I'll tell you everything over drinks tonight." I walked back to my car feeling truly free for perhaps the first time in my life. The following spring marked 18 months since the family dinner that had upended my life. My parents and I had settled into a new, distinctly boundaried relationship. We spoke monthly by phone, exchanged holiday cards, and shared occasional meals when their social calendar brought them to New Haven. They never asked about my finances, and I never volunteered information about my career progress or personal life. The emotional distance was palpable but necessary. I had stopped expecting genuine interest or unconditional support from them, which paradoxically made our limited interactions less painful. They were now extended family rather than central figures in my life story. My actual life had blossomed in ways I couldn't have imagined during those dark early days after being kicked out. Married in Marketing had continued its growth trajectory, with our client roster expanding to include regional businesses and nonprofits throughout New England. As Director of Client Services, I'd built a team of 8 account managers who reflected my commitment to both excellence and work-life balance. Carlos had become both mentor and friend, showing me a different model of leadership than the cutthroat corporate environment I'd previously known. When I hesitated to take a full week off for a hiking trip with friends, my first real vacation since the crisis, he insisted. "The agency won't collapse without you for 7 days," he said firmly. "And if it does, we have bigger problems than your vacation schedule." My tiny studio apartment had given way to a 1-bedroom in a converted Victorian near East Rock Park. The space wasn't large by suburban standards, but the high ceilings, original woodwork, and abundant natural light made it feel like a sanctuary. I'd furnished it gradually with secondhand finds and affordable art, creating a home that reflected my new values rather than status symbols. My friendship with Madison remained my most treasured relationship, deepened by the crucible of hardship we'd navigated together. She'd recently accepted a promotion that required relocation to Boston, close enough for weekend visits but far enough to change our daily connection. "I wouldn't have taken it if you were still living in a motel," she confessed over goodbye drinks. "But you don't need me hovering anymore. You've got this." Her confidence in me meant more than any corporate achievement ever had. My social circle had expanded organically through work connections, volunteer activities, and community events. I joined a weekend hiking group, started taking ceramics classes at a local arts center, and become a regular at my neighborhood farmers market. These simple pleasures, inconceivable during my status-driven Manhattan days, now formed the fabric of a life I genuinely enjoyed. Romance had re-entered my life as well, though not in the calculated way I'd approached dating in my previous incarnation. Jason, a landscape architect I'd met through my ceramics class, possessed none of the status markers I'd once considered essential in a partner. He drove a 10-year-old Subaru, lived in a modest apartment with 2 roommates, and wore the same flannel shirts until they developed holes. But he listened when I spoke, showed up consistently, and approached life with a groundedness I found increasingly attractive. Our relationship developed slowly, neither of us rushing toward conventional milestones or external validation. "I like who I am when I'm with you," he told me one evening as we cooked dinner in my small kitchen. "You don't expect me to be anything other than myself." His observation made me realize how much I'd changed. The Allison who existed before the family dinner would have evaluated potential partners primarily on their resume and family background. This version of me valued authenticity, kindness, and shared values above external markers of success. The most unexpected development in my post-crisis life was the side business I'd started almost accidentally. After speaking at a Yale student event about career resilience, I'd been approached by several young women seeking mentorship during their job searches. Those informal coffee meetings evolved into structured coaching sessions, which eventually became Reset and Rise, consultancy helping people navigate career transitions and setbacks. I met with clients on weekends and evenings, carefully balancing this work with my married-in responsibilities. The business remained small by design, allowing me to work deeply with each client rather than scaling for maximum profit. What made Reset and Rise different from traditional career coaching was my first-hand experience with professional crisis. I taught practical skills, resume building, interview techniques, networking strategies, but also addressed the emotional aspects of career setbacks. The identity loss, the shame, the need for resilience. You're the only career coach who's admitted to living in a motel and waiting tables, one client told me after landing her first position after being laid off. It made me believe I could survive my own rock bottom. These moments of impact helping others find their footing after stumbles similar to my own provided a fulfillment unlike anything in my previous achievement-oriented life. On the anniversary of my parents' ultimatum, I took the day off work and hiked to the summit of Sleeping Giant Mountain. From that elevation, I could see New Haven spread below me, the Yale campus, the harbor, the neighborhoods where I'd rebuilt my life piece by piece. Sitting on a rocky outcropping, I reflected on everything that had changed in 2 years. I had lost status, financial security, family support, and my identity as a corporate success story. But I had gained resilience, authentic relationships, meaningful work, and a sense of self not dependent on external validation. The painful dinner that had seemed like an ending had actually been a beginning, forcing me to discover strengths I never knew I possessed and values I truly believed in rather than those I'd inherited. My phone buzzed with a text from Jason. Hope your hike is restorative. Dinner at my place tonight. Made your favorite pasta. The simple message represented everything my new life prioritized: care without conditions, connection without performance, everyday joy rather than exceptional achievement. I texted back, can't wait. Be there by 7, then sat a while longer on the mountain, watching clouds cast shadows across the landscape below. Life would continue to present challenges, I knew. I rebuilt existence wasn't perfect or completely secure. But I had discovered something essential during the past 2 years. Happiness didn't require perfection or even stability. It required authenticity, connection, and the courage to build something meaningful from whatever materials life provided. As I began my descent, I thought about the many viewers who might be facing their own versions of rock-bottom: job losses, relationship endings, financial crises, family rejections. I wished I could tell each of them personally what I'd learned through my journey, that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters, and that rock bottom can become a foundation for building something better than what came before. Have you ever experienced a moment when something that seemed like the worst possible outcome actually led to unexpected growth? I'd love to hear your stories of resilience and reinvention in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please hit like and subscribe to support this channel. Share this video with someone who might be facing their own rock bottom moment. Sometimes knowing others have survived similar challenges provides the hope needed to take that first step forward. Thank you for witnessing my story. Remember that your worth isn't determined by your achievements, possessions, or even your family's acceptance. It's determined by your capacity for growth, connection, and creating meaning from whatever circumstances you face. Until next time, this is Allison, wishing you the courage to rise from your own ashes whenever life requires it.